Committee, July the 10th. 9 items on the agenda. Let's do the first 3 quickly. Number 1, apologies for absence, Khaled.
Apologies for absence from Councillors Richard Smith and Yusra Hussain.
Yep. Number 2, declarations of disposable, etc. Anybody? Heads are shaking, that's fine, thank you. Number 3, exclusion of the press and public. Any reason? No?
Nope.
Okay, right. And then item 3B that nobody else has got but me is, can I just ask people who, if they can, to look at these replies from your local authorities to the consultation document on mayoral devolution. Least it council done much, it's pages and pages, but it's worth reading, and there was a reference to scrutiny. So please read it for your own interests and your constituents, but if there's any mention of overview and scrutiny, and there's any reason to think that we might wish to add to it or comment on that, please either do it yourself or do it through your group. Or the point is, please read your local authority response to the mayoral devolution consultation. Item 4, minutes of the meeting on January the 20th. Gosh, is that 25 weeks ago or something? Right, we'll turn the pages over. The first one that I'd like further comment on is item 35, which, I don't know if Angela is in a position to say anything. First Bus were about to sell their entire UK operation. What can you tell us? Anything further, Angela?
That's a very good question. I believe they changed their plans, but I think they were looking at doing something, but I'll be honest, that it's gone in the current operating environment. The issue of sales seems to have gone away, but let me just see if I can find out a bit more for you after this meeting.
Thank you. Has anybody else heard anything? We don't know anything about the... I'm presumably selling bus companies at present is a lot more difficult than it would have been 6 months ago, wouldn't it? Bus companies without passengers. Right, we'll turn the pages over then from the January 17th meeting. Page 2. If anybody's anything to raise, or Carl, is anything you want to remind us of?
Nope. I mean, it's quite a long time ago, the meeting, and everything covered in that meeting has progressed since, such as devolution, etc.
Just a bit.
Yeah.
And the budgets are rather different from what it looked in January as well, shouldn't it? We'll come back to that. If nobody else has anything, to say, we'll move on and we'll go to item 5. This is an annual paper which produced by Khaled about statutory arrangements for next year. Tell us, Khaled, what we need to know, please.
Yeah, so this is to note that basically all the governance arrangements remain the same. Due to COVID, most annual meetings were cancelled, and so it was decided that membership would roll over. So pretty much entirely the same membership, with the exceptions of councillors Olivia Rowley and Andrew Hollier of York, Olivia Rowley of Wakefield. This will be this is their first formal meeting, so we'll welcome them to the committee. Otherwise, membership is the same, and the standing orders, etc., are all the same as well. There's been no changes to the governance documents. So unless anyone has any questions or...
Anyone wish to comment on that? Not see any. No. Formal welcomes to Councillor Hollier and Councillor Rowley. Item 7. It isn't going to take long, is it?
6. So item 6 is the scrutiny work programme. So a few years ago, we decided to do work programming in a workshop setting so members could sort of have longer to consider the combined authority and the LEPS plans for the year ahead and consider more carefully, what they wanted to look at. So we held this workshop on the 26th of June, and the members were informed about one of the combined authorities, two of the combined authorities' biggest priorities going forward will be recovery from COVID-19 and making the authority mayor ready in anticipation of successful implementation of the mayoral combined authority order and the election of the first mayor in May 2021. And so internally in the combined authority, a board has been established to oversee up to 20 work streams, which are listed on page 30, paragraph 2.5. And following discussion, members broadly agreed that the working groups would focus on devolution related issues on the implementation of devolution, and that COVID-19 would be a standing item. Impact of COVID-19 would be a standing item on meetings, committee meetings. So on page 31 and 32, the working groups are listed along with the members and their objective and focus. Should point out at this point there's a slight error in that Councillor Jacob Goddard should be on the finances and corporate working group and not the governance and scrutiny one. So I suppose first of all I want to confirm that that membership list is correct and members are happy. If any further volunteers or anyone wants to switch or anything. And the next steps for the working groups would be once it's my task to coordinate with the officer leads of each of the work streams. Each working group will shadow. And once we have a good timeline, we can start arranging the working group meetings. Secondly, the spokespersons remain the same as they were last year. It worked pretty well to divide some policy areas amongst individual members who can sort of do work in between committee meetings and take briefings and so on. And so those members remain the same. They are Councillor Stephen Baines for business growth, Councillor James Baker for environment, Councillor Peter Harron for financial and strategic issues, including devolution, Councillor Dot Foster for transport, Councillor David Jones for employment and skills, and Councillors Rosie Watson and Jeff Wynnard for corporate issues. The last thing to mention is the reviews. So last year we began 2 reviews to business growth and support programs and into response to the climate emergency declarations. They were interrupted by COVID-19, but they had completed to varying degrees a certain amount of evidence gathering and work, and so we're not abandoning those reviews. They will be continued into this year, and the original working group leads and I will put together reports, conclusions, etc., and bring them back to committee for further discussion. And so all of this is outlined in summary form in the appendix 1, which is page 35, which sort of outlines the agenda items for all the committee meetings this year, the working groups, and what they're up to, and the reviews, outstanding reviews, and also tasks for the spokespersons. That's it.
Peter, can you see me?
Oh, yes. Over to you, Betty, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just put 2 things together, if I may, if you don't mind, Chair? We've just had the dates of all the meetings for the oncoming year, and the mention of the LEP boards has come in, as well as the priorities.
Yep.
Is it possible, Chair, that we could have the dates of when the programme for the LEP meetings is going to take place, what their priorities are, and could we have those priorities linked with a report to our scrutiny meeting there, which may fit into our work programme?
That seems entirely sensible. Angela, is that practical?
Yes, so there is a programme of board meetings. They have a business plan, and obviously we work hand in glove between the Combined Authority and the LEP. So there is a shared priority behind all of those. But we can. I'm just trying to think if they've finalised this year's delivery plan. I think that is just about to be done. So that might be a useful document to share with you all that sets out their priorities. And we'll seek to tie that in with their agendas for you. We'll make a note to do that for you.
Excellent. Yeah. Mr. Archer, do you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, yeah, but yes, go on.
I think, Chair, that would be very, very useful, because obviously, because of the situation in terms of the employment, everything that's happening at the moment, it may be that the priorities that were set out in the work plan may have to alter somewhat for the future. So we can see what the intention is of the LEP boards for recovery, as well as tie in the priorities of our work programme. And I think, yes, thank you, Chair and Angela, that would be very, very useful.
Thank you. That's a minute, I think, Khaled. Mr. Archer, do you want to comment on that?
Nothing to add to what's already been said. I mean, I think it's a really good point that's been made with regards to refreshing the priorities in the light of where we are now with developing the recovery plan.
Thank you. I think that's a decision. James.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just, in terms of the outstanding reviews, I wonder if it'd be worth us putting dates to have them back to this body in the forward plan now and kind of set that in place. So I wondered, you know, perhaps whether November we could have the climate change working report coming back, or September. I mean, we want to set. I just think sometimes these things, if you put the dates in the diary, then it focuses everyone's minds on when they need to be done. And the same really with the reports back on the reviews, because obviously they're going to feed into the devolution process. I wonder, perhaps Angela and Clede, if you could say, you know, when would be a good time to report back on those, in order that we can have a meaningful input. Because if we leave it too late, I'm a bit worried that you kind of might get to a stage where some of the decisions have already been made. So I'm kind of thinking, what is the kind of the timing for our recommendations on scrutiny to feed into that process and make sure we don't, you know, that we align that with when the decisions being made.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely valid point, and we've talked before about the need for this work to be meaningful and at the right time. So, the work in the individual work streams are currently still working up their timings. I think you're right. The bulk of the work falls this first half of the year rather than the second half of the year. So I think there's probably a task for us here once you formally agree that this is your work programme for the coming year, and we probably work with Khaled to draw up the sort of critical path of the particular issues that you flagged that you want to be involved in, and make sure that, as you say, you know, a good example, your input to scrutiny arrangements comes well in advance of any paper going forward to the Combined Authority that sets out plans for scrutiny. So absolutely hear that message, and we'll work with you.
Okay.
It might mean we need to be a bit agile about arranging meetings, because there's a lot of stuff to be done and the timescales are tight.
Yeah, so it might mean, you know, the governance and scrutiny one, it's a few, you know, meetings close to each other in a week or something, you know, 2 or 3 meetings over a couple of weeks, rather than kind of like 1 meeting every month or something stretched over a larger period, and then we can get it all done then and feed into it in time. Which might mean we end up having a bit of space towards the end of the year to look at some other issues as they kind of arise, and we might obviously want to leave some space for kind of having a look at the forward working plan of the Combined Authority, and hopefully doing a bit of pre-scrutiny of some decisions as well.
Thank you. I say to anybody who listen, once we make these recommendations, nobody will have any appetite for changing it for 2 or 3 years after the American Combined Authority is set up. They won't want to go back and pull up the plants and see if they're growing. We shall have to get it right first time, or else we won't be able to, and we won't get another chance. So whose initials are next to that? Angela, Khaled?
I think it's a shared one. I think Khaled would obviously be sorting out the meetings, but he clearly needs input from myself and the others who are leading the work streams to make sure we get the timings right.
It'd just be a good idea. Just keep in touch with Councillor Baker and make sure that he's aware of what we're doing. It's a sensible point. We ought to not lose it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Carl had made the point about membership of these groups, which is excellent. We're pleased about that. I've phoned us. Does anybody want to join one of these? Because we're very happy for one or two more in each one. The more people we have committed, the better. Well, you don't have to do it now. I can't see any hands, but you can do it later. Now, groups work better with leadership. So I don't know if I have the authority to do this, but I'd like to invite Councillor Baines to chair one and Councillor Baker to chair the other. If chair is not the right word, lead. Shake your heads, James, Steve.
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed. That's the stuff, Betty. Well done. I'm glad you're here. Yes.
Yes. Well, I'm happy to agree that as Deputy Chair of this to chair that little group. And
Stephen, you'll keep the other group in order. Yeah, you need a chair, you need a coordinator. Thank you. That's progress. That's a real step forward. Councillor Rowley. Councillor Rowley, you saying something?
No.
And I also take James's point, if we do need extra meetings, well, we may have to schedule 1 or 2 extra meetings in the second half of, second half of this year, the half we're in now. So the meeting schedule on page 35 is in a sense the minimum schedule of meetings. There may be others in between. Do we need to ratify the spokespersons, Khaled? Are they? Don't have to make a decision about that, do we?
As with membership, everything's rolled over from next year. I mean, if you want to ratify officially, you can do.
No, we don't want to formal. All right. Thank you. I don't see any hands. Item 7, Scrutiny Annual Report, which is apparently not a statutory requirement. We're not compelled to produce this, but we think it's good practice. Is that it, Angela? We just think it's a good idea to explain what
absolutely. We've done. It's a good way to promote the work that Scrutiny's doing. So it's good practice. And yeah, it's second year we've done this, I think, Khaled.
Yep.
Do we just put it? No.
Sorry.
Where do we put it? Just put it on the website.
So the original intention was to produce a relatively short summary of everything we covered in the year and just put it on our section of the website, the Scrutiny section, and I suppose try and promote it a little bit. Obviously, this year it was a bit barer than we would have liked, let's say, because the reviews got a little bit interrupted by COVID-related issues. But everything, the major topics we covered are there. The sale of the bus companies and the Skills Commission and skills, etc. And it's a good summary of what we did for whoever is interested.
If anybody comments, how do we know? Would they write to Minority?
Yeah. So in the document itself and on our website, we have contact details. They can contact in any way through writing, email, phone. So we've not had any comments previously.
Chair, could I ask about how the role of scrutiny could be almost better promoted to the public out there? Because clearly it's these sort of documents are very good and cover an awful lot of ground, but obviously it's quite a niche interest. And I just wonder whether more could be done, whether through social media or communication, just to try and bring to the attention of the people out there the sort of work which the Scrutiny Committee does.
I couldn't agree more. It is well hidden, isn't it? It's just a cliche about the best kept secret about the combined authority. I don't know if anybody has ideas how we broadcast it. Send it on to a debate at all the 5 local authorities. Put it on their agenda. See, we go stirring up apathy now, aren't we? This is not the sort of thing that people rush to comment on.
I think I can just come in, Chair.
Yes, please, yes.
Yes, well, we've got 4 people on our live stream, so I guess we should say hello to those dedicated viewers. But I guess share it, if we can share that stream ourselves on our own social media feeds as councillors, and we might increase our reach a little bit as as a group. But in terms of this report, I think it'd be quite useful, wouldn't it, to send it on to the different scrutiny panels of different local authorities so that they can read it. Because I know quite often other members, when you go back to the ranch and your own local authority, they haven't got the greatest understanding all the time of what the combined authority does. So if some of those scrutiny panels were to at least kind of note this report and have a read of it, then it might encourage members across West Yorkshire to engage with it a little bit more. And also perhaps if we were to send it on to leaders of the different authorities as well in a hard copy format, or email it to them to save costs, that might be a good way of trying to encourage a few more people to engage with the report.
Quite right. Yep, let's do that. Khaled, you got that?
Yep.
Any other comments? I mean, the point about increasing our profile is absolutely well made, and people don't know we exist. Stephen, yes.
Could I just I'm just thinking, following James's comments, would it be good to sort of add to the future programme with this year's future programme to it as well? So that then they've seen what we've done last year, they see what we're going to do this year.
So why not? It's a public document, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, we can, but I think on one of the pages, on page 52 of the pack, it does have a sort of next steps in 2020-21. I think usually this annual report was supposed to go, it usually goes to the last meeting of the previous year. So it was meant to go, say, to May, which would usually be before, obviously would have decided what we're doing next year.
All right, when you send it out then, Khaled, will you ask people to particularly look at page, whatever that note is, about next steps for 2021? If there are any comments on that or any further suggestions, draw their attention to it. Yeah.
And we can edit the page as well, the scrutiny page on our website, to put our work program. It includes our work program as well for the year ahead.
Chair, could I ask a question, please?
Sure. Yes, please, go on.
Yeah. Chair, it's Betty. Thank you. I've looked at the contents of it. Obviously, I haven't read it thoroughly. I read it through. But one area in terms of scrutiny, I think not just at the CA, but all over, is exactly as you've said, Chair, is getting people to know what is the value of scrutiny? What do you achieve? Now, I know since I've been there and other members, certainly from our scrutiny meeting, we have sent forward recommendations to the combined authority. And in the terms of reference, it says that the combined authority must respond to these within 2 months. I know we've made some very good positive recommendations to the combined authority. And is it possible that what we should be doing is through our good officers, and I know we don't want to put extra work on them, is it possible that in terms of the recommendations that we've put through, we could list the outcomes to show that we have achieved a value from the scrutiny committee? And is it possible that in relation to the local press, we could get some publicity on the value of scrutiny and how our recommendations have made an impact on the combined authority?
Thank you. That's very sensible. Any other comments on that? Publicity? If we send it to the local press, you see them picking it up and reporting it?
Well, Angela. I think there's... sorry.
Angela, yes.
I was going to say, I'm not an expert on comms and how we best engage the local press, but we do have a team clearly that are focused on that. So I think it's a very helpful comment. I think I suggest we probably defer to the experts and we put the question to the comms team. What is the best way to raise that profile of scrutiny, particularly as we go forward? I think if we put it in the context of becoming an MCA, and they have the ins, they know what ticks for the local press and other stakeholders. So we'll take that away, I think, as a piece of work there, if that's acceptable to you all.
I think so, yes. Anyone else want to comment on that? Looks sensible. David, yes, go on.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right, because I think I've said this before, but there are still so many people who are unclear about what's going to be happening next May with regards to these mayoral elections, plus the way in which the combined authority is going to sort of change its profile. I think it's important that every means possible is used to draw attention to the work of the groups, of the committee, so that people do understand that there is work going on in terms of scrutinising the process leading up to next year, because people will be saying, how much is this costing? What are the implications for the area? How's it going to change my life? How's it going to hopefully improve my life? And I think, therefore, it's important that we are able to demonstrate that there is scrutiny going on, that there's work going on looking over the shoulders of officers and ultimately elected representatives. So I think it is important that we are very clear from the outset of what our role is in this process. So every means possible drawing attention to our work. Yes.
Thank you. Sensible. Councillor Davies, Paul, yes?
Yep, very much agreeing with the comments just made by Councillor Jones, and also what Angela raised. I think it would be really good to get some expert advice, if you like. The first thing most of us say when we talk about communication is social media, and most of the time we don't know what we're talking about. It's always the answer, isn't it? But I think just to comment from me is it's very important that obviously people understand what we do in Scrutiny, but I think this is a general theme, isn't it, and a general view on helping people to understand what we're doing to enhance democracy across the patch. And I think this is an issue, Angela, that goes beyond scrutiny as well. So it would be very good to get those sort of thoughts and ideas, and maybe some of those could be utilised elsewhere outside of scrutiny as well.
Thank you. That's positive. Yes. Khaled, can you arrange for me to meet or speak to the telecom specialist, not telecoms, the comms specialists, the PR people, and pass on our feelings? I mean, I'm sure you're present as well, but we need to let them understand that we do feel we're not as famous as we like to think we should be.
Yeah, I would also suggest that the working group, scrutiny and governance working group that we've just set up, can look into it as well. Best practice elsewhere, etc.
Jeff, Councillor Winard?
Just the thought, there might be some occasions where our communications colleagues might be somewhat conflicted, because it may well be we have a scrutiny, and I don't know whether it would happen, but we might have a scrutiny which was quite critical of some implementation of some proposals. The comms people would both have to simultaneously broadcast that through their channels, whilst at the same time broadcasting how well things are going. And I just think that we have to be aware of that's always going to be a bit of a dilemma for organisations like this.
You want us to be controversial, do you? That's excellent. That's what we want to be. Any other comments, please? No, I don't see any. Councillor Rowley, if you had your hand up, I don't think I would see it anyway, but you've got some interesting books.
Sorry.
That's good. Any other comments on the publicity on the annual report, and the point about next steps is interesting as well, isn't it? Move on. Agenda item 8, effect of COVID-19. Angela, please.
Yeah. So I think when we last met, there was a request for ensuring we had an item each time that would allow us to pick up corporate issues. So you've got your work streams agreed, your working groups arranged to look in depth at the work going on around devolution. But you obviously clearly contend that there are other things happening within the organisation. So the paper you've got here picks up a couple of items that went to the Combined Authority meeting a couple of weeks ago. The regular corporate planning and performance report, which provides an update on budget position, risks, KPIs, etc. And the other paper that we've been taking on a regular basis to the full Combined Authority about our COVID-19 response. These will be updated again at the meeting that's going to take place at the end of July. And picking up the comment earlier about priorities and business plans, That meeting will also see the revised business plan for the combined authority, where we've had to go back and look again at the plans we put in place in February and how they've had to be adapted in the light of particularly COVID and the MCA work. So the papers are there for information. Obviously, any questions you have on any of those, be more than happy to answer. We've also got Brian Archer with us, who's our Director of Economic Services, who can speak in some more detail about some of the points I think you wanted to address at this meeting around, in particular, what COVID-19 has meant for the economy in the region and the response that we are part of making to that, and what recovery might look like.
Quite right. Councillor Fenton, please, then we'll come to Mr. Archer. Yes, please.
Thank you. Just a question on paragraph 2.9 on page 58. There's a reference to impact on revenue and capital budgets. Obviously, local authorities have received some additional funding from government, and there's a promise of some additional funding to make up for lost income. I just wondered what the situation was with the combined authority, whether the same offer of support has come from government or whether it's related solely to local authorities. Thank you.
Angela.
The simple answer is that help has been solely for local authorities. There has been some government support for the bus industry, and we have received some money through that because of the nature of the way we operate our bus operations. Combined authorities seem to have fallen into a bit of a gap, that said that the local authorities' needs have been and position have been well understood, and funding has come, accepting that still does not cover the whole gap that's been created by COVID. We still haven't had anything directly other than some funding towards bus. We are continuing to make representations to government along with other combined authorities, and we're taking a further paper back in, let's say, the end of this month to the combined authority, sort of setting out the position. We're rather hoping we get some news before then, but if not, we will have to start looking at we are starting to look. We'll have to start putting more shape to our options about how we seek to address a gap that has a lot of question marks over it. That the whole question around how the bus industry is funded at the moment is quite challenging. So one of our big issues is we're continuing to pay bus operators at pre-COVID levels, which is part of the government support for the bus industry, but does limit our options when we have income disappearing in other places. So our tenants at the bus stations, for example, have not been there. They haven't been paying the rent. Yeah. We may get some of that money in. There's a lot of uncertainty at the moment. We obviously are still relatively early on in the year, so we can try and put in place some plans to get us to a balanced position by the end of the year. I think in much the same way as all your local authorities are looking at the moment.
And just a follow-up, if I may, in terms of some other aspects of the financial arrangements, things like the business rates pool, West Yorkshire Transport Fund. Has there been any, I suppose, impacts of COVID that we should be aware of?
On the business rates pool, we are not formally part of that because we don't collect the business rates. That's an arrangement between the local authorities. My understanding is that obviously what is in those pooling arrangements is being affected by business rates, but I don't have any direct information on that. So we're not formally part of that arrangement. On the West Yorkshire Plus Transport Fund, we have projects out there. They're continuing to spend, albeit with some challenges around being able to deliver on time. There's clearly issues about being able to work in a socially distanced way. Consultations are challenging, where there needs to be a consultation for work to progress. There has been issues about supplies and obviously people available to work as well. So our delivery of that is being affected. At the moment, we obviously have the government funding for it is still there for the transport fund. So we should hopefully get past these difficult months and be able to get back on with it.
Thank you very much.
Can you just probe that a bit further. The combined authority, I've seen a figure of 12 million somewhere. Is that something like that's a shortfall in 2021, is it? Or
That the 12 million was our sort of what we could potentially be facing by the end of the year, but full of a lot of assumptions and estimates, because at the time we did that, which was early on in early April, May time, it was unclear how long shops would be shut, what would happen on the bus industry. So there's still some unknowns. We've had a small amount of money towards the bus industry, towards the bus tendered services costs. So I don't think we expect the final position to be a loss of 12 million, but there are still some big unanswered questions, which leave us still at risk. We need to look at what happens when schools go back in September, how the bus services work for that, who funds that. And we're also working closely with DfT to understand how they see the funding model working. So I think we have a combination of losses we know we have incurred. We're not getting commission on sales of M cards, for example. We're not getting income from our tenants. There are then probably an even bigger figure of risk of extra costs that may come in depending how we choose to intervene. I think, and Brian will speak very soon about the recovery. We haven't had any direct funding to put into recovery, and how far is there an expectation that we step in to help that economic recovery? So I think we're still in a position of a lot of questions and doubts and lack of certainty about what our end position will be. So we are obviously closely monitoring it and going back to Combined Authority and Governance and Audit Committee with updates on the position.
somewhere I've read as well, our reserves is about 7 million, are they?
Correct.
In a minute, Steve, yes. And we've got projections of losing 12. Well, that's sort of grounds for a nightmare, is that really, isn't it? We have 7 million, we're going to lose 12. What happens after that? I mean, reassure.
Yeah, no, we will do everything to ensure we continue to function during the year. As I said, the 12 is a combination of loss of income and expected extra costs. So between that, there is a point where we will not be able to incur the costs necessary. There may still be funding coming in towards some of that, and we have to look at some of our earmarked reserves and whether there's an opportunity to free up any of that to help. That has a consequence. They're earmarked reserves; they're there for a reason. But we need to look at the mix of all of these, and our intention is to come back with a definitive plan for the Combined Authority to approve, to ensure we cannot go bankrupt by the end of the year. That's not allowed, and we will not allow that to happen.
That's reassuring. Stephen.
Just coming back to the comments about the rates pooling, as far as I understand it, the local authorities have gained because of this pooling in the previous years, but this year, because cities like Leeds make a surplus which they'd pay to the government, and the other authorities like Calderdale and the other smaller ones receive a rebate back from that because of the pooling. And this is where it comes unstuck this year, because if we were independent of the pool, Calderdale would have been able to claim money from the government under the business rates help. But because of that pooling factor, we won't do it, and that would apply to anybody, any of the councils which are in the position that Calderdale is in. And the other point I was going to make, a question I was going to ask regarding the bus stations and the rents. Have they actually been suspended so that they still have the debt is still there for the Combined Authority, or have they been given a rent-free period during this period?
We have followed the line, I believe, of most local authorities. We've continued to invoice so the debt is there. What we have done is been receptive to recognising there may need to be a change in the way that the payment's made. So we've not gone in heavy-handed with debt recovery measures. We have let the debt sit there and have been agreeing individual arrangements as suitable.
Okay, Stephen.
Yeah, fine, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, Angela? I don't know what and where we're going to pick this up, Andrew, but it might just have 2 minutes, please, on the future of Wellington House. I don't know if you.
I can do that. So I think Councillor Wynnard had his hand up before.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. Well,
Yes.
we'll suspend that one. Councillor Wynnard first. Go on.
I was going to ask a question about staffing and workforce issues during the COVID period. Clearly, presumably lots of staff have had to work from home. Some staff may have been redeployed. I was really interested in the extent which staff are continue to be managed, that performance management takes place, that absence management takes place, that staff are supported appropriately in trying to do their roles remotely, and really whether all of that work has continued, even though people are actually not sitting at their desks, and whether any statistics are available on absence issues and health issues and all of that sort of stuff during this period, because clearly staffing are always an organization's best resource, and it's important that they're used appropriately.
Okay, so yeah, there's quite a lot in that question. So I think the starting point is we have had the bus stations have remained open throughout. So we have had staff working at the bus stations throughout the whole period. The travel centres at the bus stations were closed, but they have recently reopened, so there are staff in there. Our access bus services were suspended in terms of taking people around, but were redeployed to assist local authorities in moving things around the district that needed to be done to support the activities around the pandemic. Our office-based people have all been working from home from middle of the 17th of March. Pretty much everybody has the ICT kit to do it and the connectivity to do that. And we've got a handful of people coming into Wellington House in order to do some work that can't be done remotely. But we have found that almost everybody whose normal job is predominantly desk-based has been able to do that work at home. People have obviously been hugely busy because we're so involved in the COVID-19 response. Plus we've got all our work about being mayor already. Plus we've got trying to keep public transport running. So there's a huge amount of work happening, which has been able to happen. I think your question about productivity, I think what we're finding is people are using their commuting time to be able to work a bit longer. And there's certainly little evidence of people not delivering. We had a few people redeployed early on, but pretty much most people's jobs are up and running and people are working to their normal role profiles. We've put a lot of work into supporting people, and there's a lot of manager time going into keeping in touch with staff, making sure they have team meetings, phoning individuals. We've been very clear if people have concerns, whether they're trying to balance caring responsibilities or even just looking at having to look after their children, for example, because they're not at school, that we're aware of that. So we've allowed people to work more flexible hours and put in place arrangements as best we can to support people. There's been a number of, we've used the HR team to help keep in touch with people who've said they're having challenges working at home, and clearly it's a massive shift from people who are usually used to coming into work in a bigger environment to be at home, and some people find that more challenging than others. So we are very much focused on trying to give people support on mental health issues, and on a practical level also about the basics, things like office furniture. So we've encouraged people to do their DSC assessments, establish if they haven't got the right working kit at home. We've been facilitating provision of monitors or chairs or other ICT bits and pieces to help make their working life easier. You asked about absence. We're just awaiting the Q1 absence statistics. I think anecdotally, I think the figures are lower. I think people are probably working through some stuff because they're at home. It's an easier environment to be able to do a bit of work than having to come out the house into the office. But we'll have the stats on that fairly soon. I think on top of that, we've also just done our annual staff survey, and we're still analysing the detailed results of that. But generally, there's some very positive feedback that people feel informed and supported, know where to go if they're having difficulties, but a huge number who feel they can productively do their job working away from the office, but an increasing number who would like the ability to be able to mix and match a bit more. I think, and I'm sure we're all the same. It's a very different working environment being at home when usually there's other people around you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster, Doc, you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to ask about whether you had return dates in.
Sorry, I think we missed the end of that.
Yeah, you froze then. Doc, we got as far as return dates.
Shall I?
Sorry,
back.
I don't know what happened there. My connection is usually very stable and it just crashed completely for no apparent reason at all. I was just about to say, do you have a return date envisaged for the majority of people, or are you envisaging a more sort of permanent working from home arrangement or a mix and match arrangement for a lot of people? If that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. And it ties into the question that the chair was just going to ask about Wellington House, I think.
Yes, please.
So I think we have absolutely agreed that the model going forward should be a hybrid, that we need accommodation for people to be able to come to, particularly for meetings, but to be able to come to work. But we are encouraging and expecting a continued uptake of working from home. People could do that before, and we've always had flexible working arrangements in place, so as to make the Combined Authority an attractive place to work. We expect going forward, we have confirmed that we expect that people will do that more, and we would encourage that. We had agreed initially 2 years ago to do a refurbishment of Wellington House to bring it up to standard and bring all of our office-based people into one building. And in order to do that, that would require, there wouldn't be a desk for everybody. And I think what the last 3 months has established is that we can certainly be extremely flexible about how many people we can fit into a building going forward. And the question about return to work, we're obviously sticking the government guidance at the moment is just work from home wherever possible. So we are continuing with that. We are looking at how we could reopen the offices. We have 2 buildings at the moment after the summer, but that is also complicated by the fact we have a refurbishment project underway in Wellington House, so that restricts our capacity. So we are looking at a plan for some partial return in the autumn when government guidance supports that, but it will not be everybody able to come back to work at once, simply because of logistics of taking into account social distancing and the work that takes some of the building out of circulation from until probably November, December time.
Dot, that's what you needed, as you were asking?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if there is a possibility that people will be hot desking, if you like, sharing desks going forward. Presumably there'll be some risk assessment done in terms of the possibility of infection of COVID when you're sharing equipment and desks, etc. Will that be taken account of?
Absolutely, and we've done risk assessments already for the way the office operates at the moment, where people are just coming in for short time spells. As and when we're able to reopen the office, it's likely that hot desking will be on a day-by-day basis, because it will not be possible to do the necessary cleaning during the day. So it will be a sort of at night, the whole office will be clean so that a different set of people could come in the morning. But absolutely mindful of our responsibilities as an employer and following the necessary guidance and doing our risk assessments.
Okay, thank you. Have any of the staff working from home made any comments about the increased costs in their utility bills?
The question has come up. I think at the moment we don't have a policy of reimbursing for that. We are looking at whether there are longer term actions we need to take if people do have to work from home for longer. I mean, clearly there's a balance. People are gaining a lot of time back from not commuting into the office. So we'll look at the package of any extra measures we need to put in place. And also follow a line from what local authorities are doing. We are trying to ensure we're consistent with what our partners as well. So we're in touch with all of your HR teams about what's happening.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Is there anywhere where you know that's happening? Have some local authorities begun to reimburse? No? No?
Not aware of it at the moment.
No. Councillor Knight, do you know of any?
I don't actually. No, I'm not aware of any.
A good point. Is that? Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Well,
yeah, it's just
okay.
something to think about.
Sorry,
Dot?
I guess it would be a question of what would they reimburse anybody with at the moment. All councils are pretty much in the same position financially.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're borrowing it, aren't we? The government's borrowing it. We're borrowing it from our grandchildren, if you work it out. We're not paying it. They're all going to pay it back in 30 years' time.
Yeah.
Any further questions, Angela, before we move on to the Mr. Archer and economic response and recovery?
There's two is Rosie Watson and James Baker.
I'm sorry. Councillor Watson.
I just wanted to ask Angela, have we furloughed anybody? Because it wasn't in the update.
Local authorities were not able to furlough in the same way as businesses. I think technically we furloughed a couple of people for a couple of weeks, but we did manage to we were able to redeploy most people. So we sought to avoid that at all costs. There is nobody on furlough now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Khaled, who else have I missed?
James Baker.
Sorry, Chair. Just on that working from home point, it'd be worth us letting our staff know about the HMRC tax that they can claim back on that because of our allowances for working at home that apply for home workers and also for councillors as well, if you weren't aware. So it wouldn't have to come necessarily out of the local authorities' own funds, but I'm sure we can all claim a bit that we're entitled to off HMRC without anyone being too upset.
Oh, that's
You're
interesting.
absolutely right. Yeah, we flagged that on our intranet. We've got a lot of information on our intranet for staff, and we have flagged that there is a tax relief arrangement that individuals can pursue if they want to.
I hadn't thought of that.
Sorry, it'd be interesting to know how much CO2 we've saved by staff not travelling and commuting for work and councillors not commuting as well, because we talk about working from home in relation to the green economy, and we always talk about the transport solutions, but actually one of the big solutions is adopting the remote meetings and saving on those transport costs and saving on the congestions on our roads in West Yorks, because I'm sure we've all noticed how much quieter it is when we go out and travel around, and if we can gain some of those practices and learn from some of those, and hopefully we can help reduce some of that congestion and CO2 in West Yorkshire as well.
Thank you. Good point. Anybody else I've missed? 8B, Mr. Archer, COVID-19 economic response recovery. Would you like to tell us what we take out of that, please?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Well, I'll take the paper as read, and if I may just cover 3 or 4 issues, particularly around some of the early challenges and the more recent announcements from the Chancellor. So I thought I'd cover PPE, finance, skills, and the economy. But just before I get into some of the detail, the comments about remote working have been really well made, and I think, as Angela said, we're in the process of analysing the staff satisfaction survey, and the general direction of travel seems to be more positive, that morale's improved, that productivity's increased, and satisfaction with the technology is higher as well. And I think that reflects the level of investment that the combined authority put into technology, which enabled us to move so many people to remote working as quickly and as successfully as we did. There have been a few issues around 1 or 2 people feeling isolated, but HR have put in lots of training support to combat some of those feelings of isolation. And I think people miss having a bit of, chat over the coffee machine and that kind of social aspect of work. But overall, productivity has increased significantly. We have started company visits, not many, but in some cases where the meeting can't be done online, we have undertaken a number of company visits and gone through quite detailed risk assessments before those visits have been allowed to continue. Moving now to the services and what we've been doing to address the COVID pandemic. Members will recall at the start of the pandemic, there was a major issue with regard to access to finance for the business community. We held a number of meetings with the banking sector, the CBI, the Chamber of Commerce and other business-led bodies to lobby the government to accelerate the loan application process. Very quickly, the number of applications increased markedly, and there were a few gaps as well. And again, the government introduced bounce back loans, which were much easier to access, and the guarantee was 100% the government guarantee. So that massively improved access to finance for those affected businesses. And of course, the government also announced the grant schemes. And in the Leeds City region, I think the response has been absolutely phenomenal. We had 21 growth managers working with the local authority colleagues, pushing out £450 million worth of grants to 34,000 businesses, whilst adapting to the new world of working remotely, which was, an incredible achievement, really. Considering, so that's made a huge difference. Initially, we had a huge volume of calls coming through the business support helpline. Over 3,000 businesses were supported through that, and we also quickly moved a lot of our delivery to the online channel. We set up a mentor scheme, and we got volunteers from the business community to offer business advice and support and mentoring for affected businesses online. On the skills side, and moving closer to where we are at the moment, on the skills side, in the region we had something like a third of the workforce out on furlough, which was 344,000 people. And it's difficult to predict depending on the different economic sort of modelling scenarios, but it's likely that there'll be a significant increase in job losses towards the end of October as people come off furlough. And that could be anything between 60 and 70,000 people entering the labour market looking for work. So one of the things we've been doing on that is obviously preparing for that massive increase in people coming into the labour market by looking to scale up the employment hub, which is about matching workers, unemployed workers to opportunities with businesses, and we've launched a number of other programs as well to support people, like the employment hub and the Future Goals program, which provides online training and support for people. The training sector has also been quite badly affected by the pandemic, particularly with regard to apprenticeship numbers. One of the local FE colleges in this region has seen a drop in income of the order of 2 million apprenticeship income, and the consequences of which are, almost 100 people being made redundant. So some real concerns about the training and FE sector being affected, particularly around apprenticeship numbers. And members will be aware that the Chancellor announced some new measures this week on Wednesday to try and shore that up and increase the number of apprenticeship starts with incentives of £2,000 per apprentice, and also £1,000 grant for people coming off furlough. The government also announced 111 million for traineeships, which are work experience programs of anything between 6 weeks to 6 months for young people aged 16 to 24. So that was very much welcomed. There was also an announcement about culture and arts venues, and a new fund being set up for to support those businesses that are affected. The amount that was mentioned by government was 1.6 billion to support theatres, galleries, museums and cultural venues, as well as independent cinemas. Now that's broken down into just under 900 million in grants and 270 million in loans. We've not seen the detail yet on how that's going to be allocated to the regions, but certainly it's very welcome for some badly affected sectors. There's also another 120 million that was announced for construction in cultural infrastructure. I said I'd mentioned PPE. Again, members will recall the PPE crisis we had just a few weeks ago. We've worked with over 97 businesses in the region and the NHS and social care to improve the supply of PPE into the NHS. The highlight of that activity was a local firm providing 12,000 mattresses for the NHS Nightingale hospitals, and we've also seen some of those businesses that were supporting diversify into producing reusable PPE as opposed to importing disposable gowns from China. So again, positive outcome in terms of local jobs growth and carbon footprint. So some positives on that. I've covered skills, I've covered PPE, I've covered access to finance. I guess the big concern at the moment is what's going to happen when all these people come off furlough and how we stimulate the demand to create the vacancies. And we are looking at bringing in some additional resource. We've got a proposal in to run a £7 million capital grants programme, which will hopefully accelerate the creation of some of the jobs. But clearly, there's a massive task to address if the unemployment figures are as high as we predict. But as I say, the announcements that have been made this week certainly will go some way to limiting the damage, and also I think some positive announcements with regards to the leisure sector. And the temporary changes in VAT and the eating out, the £10 contribution towards eating out, which members may have heard on the news. So all positive measures, but there's still a huge amount to do. Some real concerns, particularly around people coming off furlough and training providers. Happy to take questions. Hello. Sorry, Chairman, are you on mute?
Peter, you're on mute.
Clever, isn't it? That's clever, wasn't it? Sorry. Councillor Wynnard first, then Councillor Davies.
Thank you. Clearly, the authorities doing lots of interesting things in some of these key areas. One of my particular concerns is that for economic prosperity to return, we really need to get people out spending money in shops and cafes and actually engaging in the rest of the economy, engaging in economic activity. And yet it seems to me that there is still quite a large swathe of the population who are obviously rather nervous about getting back into spending money. A lot of people have got money to spend, but they need to start spending it. I wonder whether there's a role for the combined authority, as well as perhaps the other local authorities, to do more to encourage people to get out and about, to engage in business, to spend money, and try and do more to perhaps to reassure people that that it is relatively safe to do so. Because I think unless people have the confidence to start spending money and engaging in normal activity, I think never mind what the government does, never mind what the authority does, I think we're not going to move forward. So I wonder if you could comment on that, please.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's more that we can do to promote our town centres. I mean, the retail sector particularly was suffering before the pandemic, with consumers switching to the online channel and buying goods via Amazon and such like, and those retailers that didn't have an online offer were vulnerable before the pandemic. I think promoting the town centres as a leisure destination with the hospitality and catering industry is something that we need to do more of. And as I say, the VAT measures and the vouchers that were announced on Wednesday towards the cost of a meal between Monday and Wednesday might actually attract more people into the town centres when it's quieter, and we might see shopping patterns change. Instead of Saturdays being the busiest day of the week, we might find that demand is spread throughout the week because of the social distancing and people wanting to avoid all the crowds. But yeah, we do need to do more to promote the town centres, but in a managed way.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Yep, thanks, Brian. As you say, a lot of things happening in terms of government announcements and money, which is all absolutely welcome. What I'm interested in is whether there's some thinking around, if you like, almost the opportunity we've got to look at creating local economic strategies as well, and building on, in particular, the huge sort of community engagement that we've seen and mobilization within all of our communities. Certainly, I think going back, if you like, to the old normal is not something that's appealing for a lot of people. So just interested in what thought process there is around that. There's lots of organizations talking about community wealth building, local economic strategies, etc. And what's the authority thinking along those lines?
I think the community wealth building and sourcing locally has moved right up the agenda, and I think people can see the benefits of that. Whether that was, local providers getting involved in making face masks and visors, or people working more closely with the food banks. I do think there's a great opportunity for us to start thinking very differently about how we source our products and services, with a lot more buy-in local. The other thing I think that we'll see as more people enter the labour market is big increase in self-employment. Usually when there's a downturn in the economy, you see a big spike in new business formation rates. So I think there's an opportunity for to look at new types of enterprise and increasing the number of business startups that are serving a local geographic market, that aren't necessarily just about growth, but about providing a community resource. So I think we need to think differently about how we segment and target business support services across the region. Of course, we've got limited resources, so we need to focus them on, those businesses and those segments that are gonna grow, that where we're gonna get the best return on the taxpayers' investment. But some of those more knowledge-intensive sectors may well grow anyway without any public sector intervention. And I think there's a big piece of work around how we target those businesses, if you like, that are the next level down, as well as some of those community and social enterprises, which are a valuable part of the local economic infrastructure, so that you're getting the economic and the social benefits of a business in your locality, in our locality.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I think you've just laid it out as we should be looking at this, but accept it's a huge challenge, because obviously we know the impact that this is going to have. But I would absolutely support that approach. I think that could make a very significant difference going forward.
And I think that the level of entrepreneurship locally has been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the example of the company that were making mattresses in Morley in Leeds, overnight they were able to deliver a fantastic result. And then once they delivered the mattresses, they realized there's a PPE crisis, and they developed a fabric that could be used for surgical hospital gowns, NHS gowns, protective gowns. And for years the NHS procurement were purchasing gowns, importing gowns from China, low cost, disposable. So it ended up going into landfill, costs a lot of money to ship it from one side of the world to the other. And here we have a local provider in Leeds manufacturing a reusable, a washable gown that meets all the technical specifications that the NHS needs, and it's actually a lower cost option. And you know, they've already started selling it into other NHS trusts, and they've got inquiries from America. You know, we've got businesses like this, you know, locally, and you know, I think it's yeah, it's a credit. They're hidden away, some of them. You know, it's a credit to the region. You know, the entrepreneurial capacity of you know, of local people is incredible, and the resilience as well. How people have pulled together to deliver. You know, I think it's something that we should all be proud of.
I'd agree. And last comment, Chair, if you allow me, is I think a fantastic opportunity for young people as well. And I think that's the other thing that you know, when you look at these local initiatives, when you look at developing these community responses, I think we're giving our young people some real opportunities to shine, to express their potential, etc., and to develop good jobs which are meaningful and actually contribute as well, as you say, to the community. So I don't want to make things sound all rosy. We're within the COVID, but I do think that there's an opportunity there to build on.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much, David, in a minute. But we have to think how Scrutiny gets involved in this. Is a major change in employment trends, isn't it? And once it starts, it will go on for a long time. We'll have to think about that, Kelly. How do we monitor this change?
It's tricky, isn't it? I think there were 129,000 claimants at the end of May. I guess we'll have the June figures, but not the July figures yet. But it's not going to come down, and I think that we need to monitor the level of vacancies and get more and better data on that. I'm really worried about other things like big increases in universal credit claims. Consumer debt has actually come down because people haven't been spending, which is a good thing. But I think there's a number of indicators that will impact on us going forward over the next few months that we should certainly bring back to scrutiny.
Yes, well, we'll formulate some questions on that because that's pretty substantial. Councillor Jones, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. There's a couple of things. On page 70, paragraph 2.3, we talk about the West Yorkshire Economic Recovery Board. Obviously, I think most authorities, obviously speaking for my own, have got a recovery board in operation. How are the different groups then going to sort of be talking to each other to ensure that there is a consistency and there's not any sort of replication of any work that's sort of going on? And secondly, and obviously it comes under the area of apprenticeships and so forth, and that is that in terms of the impact of the supply of apprenticeships, and particularly for those young people who are due to take up apprenticeships at the end of their school careers, is there likely to be an impact for those who've been made offers that because obviously the economic downturn, is there a possibility that those offers could be reduced in terms of those young people? The other question is there a likelihood of there being an increase in the adult education budget, which obviously we've talked about a few times now in terms of how much that is and the likelihood of it not really being anywhere near enough? So is that one likely to be increased? And finally, there is a big group of people who are in that grey area of, because they've only started in business in the last few months or so, and obviously maybe just before the impact of COVID coming in, have really suffered because they haven't been able to benefit from any of the government grants, contributions and that in benefits. Is there anything that can be sort of done for those people as well? Thanks, Chair.
Okay, there's a few things in there. The apprenticeship off where an apprentice has been made an offer and then that offer's been suspended. There is obviously a risk that offer could be withdrawn, and hopefully the £2,000 incentive will mitigate against that. Adult education budget, obviously the indicative figure is 63 million. Is there a likelihood of there being any additional funding? It's difficult to say. The honest answer is I don't know, but we will need to make the case for more resource, given the scale of the Leeds City region economy and the number of potential job losses. So I think we've got an opportunity to make a very compelling and persuasive business case to increase the AEB to more than the 63 million, which is the indicative allocation. And I think we'll need to lobby quite hard with supporting evidence to increase that. I certainly don't think that we should just accept what's been offered. I think we should push very hard on that. Well, I think the final point, sorry, was other support for those businesses that might have fallen through the gap. Was that the question?
Yeah.
Sorry, David. Yeah.
Yes.
We've got a capital investment program where businesses can receive a financial contribution towards the purchase of fixed assets. This week we also launched another program called Digital Enterprise, where businesses could get a voucher for up to £5,000 contribution towards information technology, IT kit, which would enable them to work more effectively online, obviously in the new normal. So there are some support programs for those businesses, as well as mentoring programs and other support that's available through our local authority partners. I think the first point, sorry, which I didn't address, was the recovery plans and the 4 or 5 work streams, making sure that there's no duplication and overlap. The Combined Authority, working with the LEP, have obviously formed an economic recovery board. That strategy is evolving at the moment with those strategic priorities. The core elements in that recovery strategy will be consistent. I guess the debate will be for the recovery board to determine what the weighting should be. So, for example, should we focus more on business startup, inclusive growth? What level of resource do we need to ring fence against each of those priority areas? And at the moment, it's taking shape in terms of what we think should be delivered, and the evidence base is being gathered. The next stage then will be to determine how it's going to be delivered and what the products and services should be to support each of those work streams. But of course, the starting point has to be to understand, what the current landscape is. Is it still fit for purpose? How does it tie in with the industrial strategy? And how is it going to address our specific local Leeds City region needs? So it's bespoke to our region. And I know Alan Rees is leading that work.
Thank you. Supplementary, Mr. Jones? Councillor Jones? You switched off.
Sorry, I'm playing with different things on here. It was only my fault. Right, can I just come back then on looking at obviously the standing order, a standing item which will be on the agendas for this next year. Then will it be possible then to sort of look at some of those areas, like for example, where the job losses have been across all the different districts? Because clearly, obviously, as local representatives, we're focused on our own areas. But for us as a scrutiny, we know we do have to look outwards. We do have to look at the other areas. And I think it'll be important for us to be able to have a clear view of what the impact has been in the 4 of the districts, so that we're able to get that sort of informed view of where the issues are, where the job losses are, what type of job losses there've been in each of the different districts. Because I think that is something clearly we have to be aware of, because so that we're not siloing into our own individual districts over the next year or so. So I think that's something else we probably do need to consider. Yeah,
I think that's a really good point, and we do need definitely need more and better data, more granular data on the impacts across across our region. so for example, if you look at the Black Lives Matter campaign and the support to BAME-led businesses, I'd like us to be in a position to know exactly how much support has been provided to some of those communities. Hard to reach communities. Are there any gaps? What do we need to do to address those gaps in terms of the take-up of business support? Are there any barriers? So we formed a small working group, which I think is meeting this afternoon, to look at that, whether there are cultural barriers to accessing business support and the impact on localities and cultures and different groups, because I think that's really, really important, so that we don't have a one-size-fits-all. Where there are gaps and barriers, we can address them.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Archer?
Chair, may I?
Go on, Betty. Yes, go on.
Thank you very much, Chair. But thank you for the presentation, very interesting. And could I just ask, obviously supporting the comments that you've made about the funding from governments, etc. Over the years, as the Chair will know, we've actually had the issue of apprenticeships, valuable apprenticeships, on our agenda. We've had concerns as members in terms of the value of those apprenticeships, of people actually receiving the apprenticeship levy, and somebody, not benefit in terms of what we would consider to be a valued apprenticeship. One of the schemes that Brian has identified is the 16 to 24-year age group. I've seen the list of the itemized issues under each heading. One of them is preventing NEET. We've discussed that already at our committee, you'll recall, Chair. And the other one that's been brought to light again is not something new at all. In the youth opportunity, we used to call that YOPS.
YOPS, yeah.
Yeah. And when I worked in a managerial capacity within the health service, I had some of these individuals, young people, as part of my team on training. And the most disappointing thing at the end of it was, when the 6 month was up, was the unlikelihood of them being able to take a job within the health service. They got training, but there wasn't a job available. And the disappointment to these young people was tremendous. That's when we had employment. Now we're in a situation where you quite rightly said, Brian, when the furlough finish, we're going to be in a situation where we're going to have more people unemployed. We're going to have quite a few of the major employers out of the picture. We heard more yesterday. And I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. Now, coming back to all your bullet points in your report, have these bullet points in this report under these headings changed at all in terms of the priorities for the future, or are they just what was set at the beginning? That's one question. Secondly, we collectively across all authorities, obviously we're all in the same position. What priorities are we going to be given to actually try and support these young people who we've given them training when it comes to actually applying those skills, as David has just mentioned? Are we going to be able to target some industries where these young people through training are going to benefit? Or are we just going to be thinking, and it's a commodity that everybody uses, that the low pay sector in some of the service industries is going to take up some of these young people that may have had achievements to higher qualifications?
Sure.
Would you like me to come in on that, Chairman?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah. Again, it's a really good point. I vaguely remember the OPS scheme, the Youth Opportunities Training Programme, where a lot of young people were left disappointed at the end of the programme and there was no job for them. I think the changes that have been made since then, in terms of the launching of the new traineeship scheme, will help. that'll give a young person up to 90 hours work experience, so, which could be anything from 6 weeks to 6 months. But last year, I think there were only 15,000 traineeships. The extra funding, the extra 111 million, you would hope, will incentivize employers to offer a job or progress those traineeships into an apprentice with a job at the end. So they would get £1,000 for the trainee, and then if they go on to an apprenticeship, they'd get another £2,000. So hopefully that will incentivize employers to do the right thing. With regards to your point about the sectors, again, that's a really good one. What are we doing to enable young people to progress and improve the skills? And I think it's important that we're training people for for those sectors that are growing. So we talk about cybersecurity and digital and the sort of knowledge intensive industries. And I think the supply of young people in the labour market isn't sufficient at the moment to meet that demand. So if you talk to employers, they'll say, well, we can't get computer coders for love nor money or electromechanical engineers. So I think there's a big piece of work in terms of understanding what the demand is from employers and ensuring that the training providers are delivering what the employers want. I think we've also got to recognise that not everybody can do A-level maths, and it's important. We want more jobs and we want quality jobs, but it's getting that balance right. I'm not sure what else I could. It's a big challenge, and obviously we are seeing changes with the devolution of the adult education budget, but really young people are going to be disproportionately affected through this pandemic, and I think you're quite right to raise it. We do need to do more to support young people into quality jobs where there's an opportunity for them to progress and to grow.
Thank you. That's not what we want to hear, Betty, but it's the truth, isn't it?
It is, Chair. And last time when we spoke about this, you will recall that we were rather at a loss to understand when we had some officers giving us a presentation on career development and apprenticeships. And I think all of us at that particular day, Chair, you will recall, we actually were aghast that they were finding it very difficult to go into schools, education establishments, and they had to find an excuse to go in to speak to young people. So just remarking back then on the conversation we had and the hopes for the future, I think from the presentation we've had from Brian, I'm hoping that the connectivity between the training is going to connect through the colleges, because obviously there is a demand in some of the courses that Brian has mentioned, but are we getting that through our colleges, through the curriculum, to make that step for those young people for the future?
Brilliantly said. That's it. That sums it up. Well done. Anything else, Mr. Archer?
No, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go around everybody individually and then we can go have our lunch. Councillor Davies, anything else you wanted to say? You haven't had a chance?
No, I'm absolutely fine. Thank you.
Councillor Jones?
Fine, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Watson?
Oh, hang on.
Try again. Now then.
Did you get me?
No, not
fine,
that.
thank you. I'm fine, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Winard?
I'm fine, thanks.
Councillor Hollier?
Nothing further, thanks.
Councillor Kilbane?
Fine, thanks, Chair.
Councillor Fenton?
Nothing further from me, thank you.
Betty?
Nothing further, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Baines? We haven't missed anything?
Fine, excellent presentation. Thank you, Brian.
It was. Councillor Baker?
No, my only comment, there's a couple of people on the live stream who've kind of been asking questions, so perhaps we could find a way of incorporating something like that into future meetings. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Councillor Goddard, anything?
Nothing from me, thank you, Chair, but thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting.
It's been interesting. Councillor Knight?
No, nothing further, thank you.
Councillor Foster? Or has disappeared? Never mind. Right, thank you everybody. We've got an agenda for a timetable for future meetings. Those who volunteered for the working parties will hear from Khaled as soon as is appropriate about working party meetings and where. And I do hope, Angela, we can come back to Wellington Street. I know it's inconvenient, but these meetings are interesting, but they're not half as good as actually seeing each other around the table and having informal.
Noted.
It's not the same.
No, it's not.
No, no. Well, tell them we want to be back in Wellington Street as soon as we can. Thank you, everybody. End of meeting.
Thank you.
So,
Bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.